There are 7 stops amidst this game. And although we may be discussing this through the phase of be the man, ultimately eradicating scarcity, be the king, establishing abundance, and then, well, expanding our legacy through building a kingdom, although we're talking about these 3, and we've also discussed inside of this the reality of the process of asleep to awake, from awake to active, from active to apply to accelerate, and accelerate to ascend and become a new man. Along this journey, we're going to be taking some pit stops, literally some pit stops. Sometimes inside of the process, where we're going to have to focus on specific categories of conversation. Inside of Be the Man, we're going to have a series of conversations. The first one of that is the pit. Now, the pit itself was a concept that was created by lead trainer Wake Up Warrior, Sam Falsafi. They began covering this up as the dark place in which we hide our lies. The pit, over the last 7 years in Wake Up Warrior, is the place where all men begin the journey to truth. See, without a foundation of the facts, it is impossible for you to fucking rise to a bigger future. See, look what happens. If you find yourself stuck in a pit, and inside that pit you tell lies, which every man does when he comes to the gate of warrior. He lies about what he's done, he lies about where he's at, and he lies about where he wants to go. He'll do this and you'll do this in one of 2 ways. You'll either blatantly fucking tell lies, or you will just not say shit. You'll withhold, and inside of that, you create lies of omission versus lies of commission, where you're actually committing the lie, now you're just omitting truth. Now, this process of the pit is about uncovering a foundation upon which you can actually build a kingdom. See, look at how this makes no fucking sense. You tell me you want to build a kingdom. You tell me you're a kingdom builder. You tell me you want to have it all. Yet to build a skyscraper that high, up into the sky, in order to build that, the foundation upon which the construction of that kingdom must be solid and it must be secure. This means that the person who we've got to deal with first in the equation is you, motherfucker. You're the issue, because your kingdom sits upon the foundation of the man that you are. The king is simply a crown with skill sets and mindsets and abilities, but underneath that crown, and strip that robe off, what you have is you, the man. And so the first stop in this journey is inside the pit, inside the dark place where you hide the secrets, the half-truths, the twisted realities, the unworthiness, the shame, the guilt, the blame, and the darkness that ultimately acts as an inhibitor and a retardant to your ability to grow. No different than trying to put a fire out when they fly by with helicopters and drop the fire retardant to put the fire out. This same process has been going on inside of your life. And so you can talk to me about kingdoms, you can talk to me about prosperity, you can talk to me about abundance, but our first stop along the way is in the pit. Now, the second stop inside of Be the Man, we're going to move from the pit into the conversation of power. See, once we have a foundation of the facts, that means we have a future that can actually be realized. When my foundation is not the facts, but fantasy and fiction, then the fictional foundation upon which I rest builds nothing more than a fantasy of a future that will never be. So my push and my drive is to do what? Is to establish that foundation, but then to understand what is power. What is power and how do I access it? How do I find it? How do I retain it? How do I keep it? How do I harness it? And how do I predictably and sustainably leverage it on a daily basis? So again, you can come to me and tell me you want to build a kingdom, but you have a foundation of fiction and you're fucked. So let's assume then that you have a foundation of the facts and you're not fucked, but you're actually in a foundation that will set you up for a future that can be realized. Now our challenge becomes the next piece, which is, do you even have the fuel or the energy to make the journey? Do you know how to regenerate it night after night and day after day? Do you have the capacity in you to continue to produce and to play? And so we look at the conversation of power. Inside this pit, and the pit and power become unified. Inside of this game, a man weaponized by the truth and weaponized with power and the ability to use a science and a system inside of Warrior to access that power on demand with a snap of your hand. Now, this takes us into our next stop inside the journey of Be the Man, which is the stop of perspective. See, I can have a foundation in the facts inside the pit. I can find my gift. I can access power and understand how to harness that power. But if I access inside the pit the facts, and I access inside of the power play the understanding of me and how to harness that power, I also have to recognize that my perspective will either guide me or destroy me. The way I deal with my stories inside of my own fucking head as I begin to rise from that pit will determine me instead. It will let me see whether I get to create the kingdom that I desire or whether I simply default into a kingdom that's on fire. This experience of going into the perspective is the understanding of psychology. The psychology, persuasion, and influence of yourself, and the psychology, persuasion, and influence of others. So you can tell me, I want to build a kingdom, and I will believe you. But if you do not have a foundation that is rested upon the facts that were only obtained inside the pit, fuck you. You can tell me that you want to build a kingdom and an empire that will last. But if you have a foundation of the facts but have no predictable system to access power, I again say, fuck you. You can come to me and tell me that you want to build a kingdom and have a life that's on fire and have it all inside of the warrior's way, have the foundation of the facts inside of the pit, have access to tools, weapons, and science of duplicatable and predictable power. But if you don't know how to persuade yourself and those around you, if you don't know how to deal with this projection system of meaning that your mind is and has been given to you as a gift, I deliver you up the same gift again. Fuck you. But assume that you're able to get these three under wraps. The stop in the pit, the stop in power, and the stop in perspective. We have one final stop inside the Be the Man phase in order to set us up to move into the Be the King phase. That is the conversation, purpose. See, purpose bridges the gap between being the man and being the king. Purpose is the reason why. Why even make this journey? See, once you've accessed inside the pit the facts, and once you've accessed power, and once you've accessed perspective, for the very first time, you'll be free to ask the simple question of why. Why do I want this? Do I want this? Do I desire to be a king? Do I desire to build a kingdom? Is this what I truly want? See, the man that you'll be when you begin to ask those questions after having passed through the first three stops, stop number one, the pit, stop number two, inside of power, and stop number three in perspective, as you arrive at the bridge between be the man and be the king, which is the bridge of purpose, the bridge of soul purpose, you'll begin to ask the powerful question that would change your life. Who am I really? And what is the purpose of my life? See, there is no amount of caffeine in the world or cocaine that can inspire me to continue to produce at the level and the speed and the consistency that I do. What drives me and pushes me, what takes me through the darkest nights and into the brightest days, is a deeper sense of purpose in the why behind my production. Why make the money? Why build the business? Why reestablish order in my marriage? Why put my body on fire? Why even step into the game of establishing abundance at all? And so Be the Man is bridged into that next phase of Be the King by that fourth stop, the stop of purpose, specifically what we call soul purpose. Now, once I have made it across that bridge, my game itself opens up again. I find myself squarely now in the Be the King phase. I've moved beyond the first three stops, crossed the bridge in the fourth stop. Now I move into the fifth stop. That is the stop of production. Now, production itself is the standard. We don't just sit around here and pontificate upon what could be. Our world is driven by results. With this inside of the application, the acceleration, and the ascendant phase, demand that you have results. Otherwise, what the fuck is the point? Sitting around and sounding smart at a cocktail party or being able to write some cool shit down in a journal is not going to change you, and it's not going to change anyone that you know. What will change you and what will change your world are results. And that means that production must become the focus, specifically production in the conversation of business, the business of money, the business of marriage, and the business of family. I want to talk about three things. I call them the trifecta of insanity that will either build a king or will break a man. Notice what I said. Build a king or break a man. Marriage, money, and family. You put those three together, a business you've got to run, a marriage you've got to unite, manage, and connect with, and children you've got to be inspired and lead. You put those three together, and what you have is a king-making machine. Or you have a man who drifts into sedation and dies. And so inside of this, we're going to learn to produce. You're going to learn maximum production and mindsets and skill sets. A king establishes order in abundance by producing across all four domains, but specifically with an emphasis on the three core businesses. The primary business that makes the money, the marriage that brings the meaning, and the family that brings the purpose and the legacy long term. These three investments in business all sit under the game of production. And so we review. Inside of Be the Man, I sit in the pit, stop number one. Inside of Be the Man, I go to, well, the power play, which is stop number two. Then I go to the third stop, which is perspective, stop number three. And then I hit the bridge. The bridge, stop number four, a purpose, specifically soul purpose, the fuel that will be necessary to take you on the journey from simply being the man to building the kingdom. Now, across that bridge, we move into the Be the King phase, and we find ourselves in production. Production are the skill sets, a weaponization of creation, not just in business, but also in marriage and family. Specifically in business, the topics of ultimately generation of revenue, making money, growing money, making money and growing money. And at the same time, making a family and growing a family, making a marriage and growing a marriage. No different. The same skill sets to seduce your wife are the same skill sets demanded and required to seduce a prospect in business or to seduce your children to a bigger vision and future as a family. And so our lives sit back inside this stage, and many will stay in this stage for years. Years mastering the mindsets and skill sets required and the depth of knowledge that it demands a king to truly stand as a king. There is no kingdom if there is no king, and a kingdom is not built in a weekend. So a weekend warrior who is simply a king for a day is not a man long enough to stay in a position of power to build something that will last. And so we move into the second piece inside of this Be the King experience. While purpose was the bridge and production was our first real solid stop inside of the Be the King experience, the next one is profit, which is my ability to ultimately what? Maintain results, profitable results inside my businesses, stockpiling cash, inside my marriage, stockpiling cash, inside my family, stockpiling cash. What do I mean by stockpiling cash? Well, in the business sense, that's literally what I'm talking about. Your ability to demand profitability from your companies. Then your ability to take those same moves and those same skill sets and apply them to building massive cash deposits in your marriage. Meaning a marriage that is filled with abundance, eliminating any sense of scarcity sexually, emotionally, intimately, and through communication. With your children being able to do the same thing. Profitability and productivity become the standard for the king. The game of measuring and the game of owning up to true results becomes the only life that truly exists. This king mode then bridges the gap. And we bridge the gap when we recognize that once we've become a king, and we've made the stop in the pit, we've made the stop in perspective and power, we've made the bridge jump across purpose, we've locked down production, And we've now begun to lock down profit. For the first time in our lives, awakens the kingdom builder. The king who is no longer satisfied with simply the needs of his family and himself, but now begins to want to build something that will last and something that guarantees he will never, ever, ever go back. This final stop is the stop of protection. That protection phase that I speak of is ultimately assuring and building the systems and processes, teams, and ultimate accountability that assures that the man that he has become stays unified under the crown of the king that he has become, and that the king, unified with the queen and his children and his businesses and his life, is on a trajectory to build a future and a legacy that will last forever. There is no going back. This is why there is no rush in the beginning. See, to build a kingdom not only demands a higher level of purpose, but to build a kingdom that lasts requires a commitment to protection of what you have built, an acceleration of what you're building, an ultimate ascendant experience of transformation in who you've been, who you're being today, and who you're called to become tomorrow. And so this journey itself ends with prosperity. Prosperity is ultimately legacy. It's very uniquely different than scarcity found in being the man. And as we eradicate it, we move into the next stage of establishing abundance. We then move into the final phase, which is ultimately exponentially building legacy. But this is the experience of prosperity, which is production married up to purpose. When you put production and purpose together, you experience prosperity. Prosperity is a life that is driven as a king simply by desire. What do I want today? What do I want to do? What do I want to buy? What do I want to invest in? What do I want to be about? Who do I want to become next? It's in this phase of prosperity that a king knows that for the rest of his days, he will simply play the game of high-level global expansion. That everything that he is about impacting and punting the planet. That everything that he's about is about establishing a legacy intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, and financially for the world, but for his family, for his children, for his grandchildren. That 3 fucking generations, 5 generations from now, your great-great-great-great-grandchildren will be speaking of and reading of the stacks and the books and the work and the documented journey of the kingdom that you built. And as they begin their stage inside of being the man, they will be left with one simple question. Where is the plan? Because what you didn't know in this journey, going across all 3 of these games and making all of these 7 stops and experiencing the cycle that we speak of, what you're experiencing is the life of expansion. The only difference is you are learning to document it. Hence, it goes faster, more efficient, and more smooth than anything else you could have ever done before coming here. My brother, this game itself and these stops works. It doesn't work some of the time. It works every single fucking